Heart to Heart, a Catholic media ministry, and the Bellarmine Jesuit Retreat House present Father Michael Sparrow in The Attitude of the Beatitudes, Virtue versus Vice. We continue now with Father Sparrow's sixth talk.
Blessed are the merciful, for mercy will be shown to them. Richard Gardner, in his book on Matthew's Gospel, writes, at first glance, such statements as, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Such statements seem to suggest that the process of showing mercy begins with us. That, however, is not the case. It is God who is merciful and gracious, first of all, and the people of God are who they are because they have received God's mercy. I love this image of divine mercy. It's Jesus standing in a doorway. It harkens back to that image in Revelations chapter 3, the strong indictment of Jesus of the people of Laodicea being lukewarm. I wish you were hot or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. But then he goes on and he says, I stand at the door of your heart knocking. Let me in. Jesus has no interest in condemnation. If there's an indictment, it's the indictment of love. I want to draw you closer to myself. And here in this image of divine mercy, Jesus stands at that doorway. Image that as the doorway of our hearts. And in this image, he stepped inside. It's an image of great hope. That door opens from the inside. We alone can open the door of our hearts. The Lord is never going to pound and break down the door. He's not going to rush inside. He comes into those who welcome him into our hearts. So here he is standing in that doorway, walking in toward us. And out of his pierced heart, which is invisible, are these rays of light. That image of divine mercy is a sister or brother image of the Sacred Heart devotion, which is so important to Ignatian and Jesuit spirituality. Out of this wounded heart of Jesus flows the red light and the white light. The red, symbolic of the blood that flowed from the pierced heart of Christ. The white, symbolic of the water that flowed from the pierced heart of Christ, as St. John describes it in his gospel. This red light is also symbolic of the red blood of Eucharist. The white, symbolic of the waters of baptism. And these lights, they go off the canvas. There's no end to that divine light. It penetrates. It goes to the very ends of the earth. It goes to the ends of the universe and beyond. Jesus' hand is raised in compassion. And if you look closely, you see in his hand, it's the image of the resurrected Christ, and he bears his wounds. In this hand, visible are the wounds. And just peeking out from under his tunic are his feet, and they're the pierced feet of Christ. So all 5 of his wounds are visible through his heart, through his hands, through his feet, his hand raised in this gesture of peace and mercy. This gentle smile on Jesus' face, and this golden halo, this burning fire behind Jesus' head. Symbolic of this passionate desire to draw each of us into his mercy. And then under the image are the words, Jesus, I trust in you. Where did this image come from? A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to lead another one of those pilgrimages, visit holy site so-and-so with Holy Father so-and-so for the incredibly low price of such and such. Well, I'm one of those Holy Father so-and-sos going to holy place such and such. Well, on this particular pilgrimage, we went to the holy sites of Poland. And we went to the shrine of divine mercy where Jesus appeared shortly before World War II with this image of divine mercy and his revelations. And he asked that this picture be painted and that the words, "Jesus, I trust in you," be inscribed underneath the painting. Now that would be incredible and amazing enough. But one of the things for me that so powerfully underlies the truth of these apparitions is that that convent is less than a 40-minute drive away from Auschwitz, where arguably the worst atrocities of World War II took place. In the Nazi concentration camp, the Nazi camp where millions of Jews and Catholics and homosexuals were tortured in conditions of depravity, killed in gas chambers, and their bodies burned. Among those was the Saint Maximilian Kolbe, this apostle of divine mercy, who gave his life so that a family man could survive. Jesus appears to this little Polish nun less than a 40-minute drive away from those concentration camps with his message of, we need to be merciful to one another. God is merciful to us. We need to let that mercy penetrate our hearts so we can be merciful one to another. Where this becomes very personal is that each of us need to touch that place, that mercy doesn't begin with us, it begins with God, and we recognize that we all stand in need of God's mercy. We need to look in the mirror of truth and recognize our own brokenness and open our hearts to God's divine mercy. I think cinematically and dramatically, that's so beautifully depicted in Victor Hugo's novel, Les Miserables, which has been a very successful musical stage play and now made into a movie, and there was an earlier movie of that. There are two characters there that stand. One is Jean Valjean, who steals a loaf of bread, is thrown into prison for many, many years. And then this righteous prison guard, Javert, who hunts him down for violation of his parole. The moment of crisis in Jean Valjean's life is when he steals again from a bishop who has shown him mercy, and the cops catch him and they're going to throw him back into prison, and the bishop is merciful and says, no, he didn't steal it, I gave it to him. And matter of fact, you forgot this extra silver. Take this, take the best of the best. That cracks open Jean Valjean's heart. That act of mercy cracks him open, and he says, I deserve to be thrown back into prison because I'm a thief. And by the mercy of this good man showing me the mercy of Christ, I got to make a choice. How am I going to live my life? And he chooses to reform his life. He makes a radical about-face, and he becomes a man who shows mercy and compassion to others. Later on in the story, Jean Valjean shows that same mercy to Javert, the prison guard who has been haunting him, who has been searching for him all these years so he can throw him back into prison. And through this turn of events, Jean Valjean saves Javert's life. And Javert has this choice. Does he open his heart to divine mercy, to the mercy that has been shown to him by this convict? And the answer is no. His pride wins and he ends up taking his own life. He chooses death rather than allow the mercy to convert his heart. It's a powerful story, told and retold within our own times, because it's not simply a work of fiction. That's the story that's played out inside every one of our hearts. Let me make this very personal. Back in 1990, I had run a theater group for 16 years. It was very successful. Got a lot of notoriety. We traveled all over the United States. I graduated from one of the best drama schools in the country, the Yale School of Drama. I received a lot of acclaim for my work. We went over to Europe. We toured England. We toured Ireland. We went across Canada. We went across the United States. We were good at what we did. And then I began to burn out. Burn out because I was living a lie. I was an addict, and I kept my addiction very secret, hidden from others. But my life began to fall apart, and I knew I needed to leave the theater group. So I thought, well, I'll do something very righteous. I'll volunteer as a missionary over to Africa. Matter of fact, I had made contact with one of the Jesuits over there. My dad announced that my son, he was so proud of me, my son is going over to Africa. He's going to be a missionary. And my life fell apart. I couldn't do it. I ended up in a recovery program for 7 months, recovering from my own addiction. In the midst of that, Jesus cracked open my heart, and I realized at a much deeper level than I had ever allowed myself to touch my need for God, for divine mercy. Because I was used to standing up in public, people cheering me, saying, wow, wonderful. And I'm a good talker. I inherited the gift of gab from my dad. He was a salesman. I see myself as a salesman for God. But at that moment, that was a moment of deeper conversion. I went from being a good guy to a man who knew I was nothing without the love of Christ. And in the midst of that, I wrote this poem called Trust. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. Psalm 118. I've read books on trust. I've heard tapes on trust. I've written journals on trust. I preach sermons on trust. But let's begin by my admitting, I don't trust you, God. I'd like to trust you. I've prayed to trust you. I told others to trust you. I told others I trust you. But the truth is closer to fear. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of you. Yes, you, all judging, all seeing, all knowing you. Yes, me, semi-controlled, semi-consistent, semi-confused, me. I'm afraid of what will happen if I ever really entrust my life into your all-powerful, almighty, all hopefully merciful hands. I've heard stories about your sainted friends, waiting dark night in the cell of their souls, losing their heads at the most inopportune times, fed to the lions for lunch or dressed up for dinner, roasted medium rare. You see, I've talked to your son, and he assures me no servant is greater than the one who sends. So yes, I trust you'll lead me to a lonely hill where 3 nails and 2 wooden crossbeams are waiting. This won't come as a welcome surprise. And to tell you the truth, I can't trust you'll return 3 days later to keep your promise to roll that stone away. I've been abandoned and betrayed already, thank you. The most trust I can muster is to entrust you my heart 5 minutes at a time. Come, take me as your own. I give you all I am and all I ever hope to be. I am your servant, your friend, your child. Transform me, possess me, liberate me, fill me, do with me what you will. For the next 5 minutes. Then, please, come. Please, call back again. Re-extend the invitation. Going into that recovery program, writing that poem, and more importantly, trying to pray that poem of surrendering to God's mercy and knowing myself deeply as a sinner and even more deeply loved by God, was a transformation I'll never forget. It's one that I've always been grateful for. It's one I return to again and again and again. When I start reading my own press reports and I get puffed up because I did a good job, or reading my evaluations and I get depressed because I didn't hit the mark, I return to this place of saying, what's it about? Who are you pleasing? Why do you do what you do? If whatever our job is, whatever it is that we do to put bread on the table, if we're doing it just for the bread, it's not going to suffice. Whether we're working in a courtroom or a medical room or a pulpit or out in the fields or behind a computer desk, do it for the sake of the one whom we seek to serve. That's the only reason worth working, is allow that love to penetrate our hearts so we can give back that love to those we seek to love, our family, our friends, those most in need of God's mercy. As Peter Kreeft says so well in his book, Back to Virtue, there are no good people. There are no good people. And the best of us say so the most clearly. Saints agree they are sinners. Only sinners think they are saints. Isn't that ironic? Saints agree they're sinners. Only sinners think they're saints. Only fools demand justice, for where would we be if we got it? No, mercy is our only hope from God, and our neighbor's only hope from us as well. What's the opposite of mercy? I think we could make a good case for greed, focusing on what we want and ignoring the needs of others, seeking more and more for ourselves. I think a great example of this tension between greed and mercy, between revenge and forgiveness, is dramatized in Shakespeare's play, The Merchant of Venice. It's the story of Antonio, a wealthy Venetian merchant who, in order to assist a dear friend in need, takes out a loan from the greedy Jewish moneylender Shylock. Antonio is overly confident in his ability to repay the loan, and he foolishly signs a promissory note stating that should he default on his loan, Shylock could take a pound of Antonio's flesh in lieu of repaying the money. Antonio's fortunes reverse, and he defaults on the loan. Shylock is greedy, and he has plenty of reason to nurse a grudge against Antonio and the other Christians who have spat on him and called him a dog. Furthermore, Shylock's been betrayed by his own daughter, who stole his money and eloped with a Christian. So Shylock is greedy for revenge and demands the full measure of justice against Antonio. Portia, the wife of Antonio's friend, to whom he's lent the money, pleads with Shylock to forgive the debt. And in one of the most eloquent passages in Shakespeare's corpus, Portia speaks of this virtue of mercy. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptered sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. And earthly power doth then show likest God's when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, And that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. Well, Portia's pleading falls on deaf ears. Shylock will hear none of this cry for mercy. He demands justice. The court is forced to rule in his favor. Shylock is entitled to a pound of Antonio's flesh. Shylock rejoices and praises the wisdom of the court. But before he can exact his payment, it is discovered that Shylock cannot shed a single drop of Antonio's blood in this cutting, because that is not specified in the bond. Ho ho! Shylock is now himself subject to having all of his money and goods confiscated for having sought the life of Antonio, a Venetian citizen. It is Shylock's turn to seek the mercy of the court. He gets more justice than he was seeking. Shylock leaves court a broken man. Now, let's not read this play as simply reinforcing stereotypes about Jews and Christians. For isn't there a bit of the Shylock inside all of us? I think that's the point. Our own greed and desire for revenge, sometimes disguised as a demand for justice against those who have hurt us, drives us to want to exact the most severe penalties against others. But when the tables are reversed, it's our turn to seek mercy from others. We want to exact justice against others, but we seek mercy for ourselves. We don't want to forgive, but we want to be forgiven. Remember Jesus' words. The measure you measure out will be measured back to you. And again, in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus teaches us to pray, forgive us as we forgive others. Brother Roger, the founder of the Taizé community, writes in his book, Glimmers of Happiness, all who strive to root their lives in forgiveness seek to listen rather than to convince, to understand rather than to impose themselves. Where this power of mercy and forgiveness came home to me most clearly was through watching the sometimes tense interaction of my parents. Now, there are some situations of domestic abuse where a woman can be emotionally or physically beaten by her husband, and she needs to get out of the marriage for her safety and for the safety of her children. But this was not the case with my parents. My mother was a very strong woman. However, when my dad was struck with cancer, he did not handle it well. He became insular. He became cantankerous. He drank too much. He always had a problem with his anger, but when he drank, his anger would go out of control. And frequently, the object of his ire was my mother. I couldn't stand the fact of having my mom verbally abused. My dad never laid a hand on her, but he would lacerate her something fierce with his tongue, especially after he had been drinking. And as he got closer and closer to death, and he lost more and more control, inwardly he became more and more frightened. And my dad didn't do his inner homework. He didn't mourn the loss of his life, the loss of his control, and he gave way to this anger. And in the face of that, his anger sparked my anger. And I let him have it on a number of occasions. I just blasted him with my own righteous anger, trying to defend my mother. How dare you talk to her that way? My mother pulled me aside and shut me up short. She said, how dare you talk to your father that way? The man is dying. Don't you understand what's going on inside his heart? The man is terrified. Everything that he's worked for is being stripped away. He's losing his dignity. He's humiliated beyond humiliation. He can't control his bowels. He can't control his bladder. For God's sakes, he can't walk. He can't feed himself. He can't take care of himself. His world is being shattered. Don't you understand that? He doesn't mean what he's saying. He's terrified inside. What he's saying behind those words is, I'm a frightened child, help me. My mom understood. I didn't get it. I took his words at face value, and his anger sparked my anger, and I just got tough, and it was two bulls going against each other. And all that happened as the result of that was we wouldn't talk to each other for 3 days. Because of the love of my mother. I believe in the gift that is love, bounty of the Lord's faithful mercy. So I rise with the sun to praise God, to pray for myself and all others because of the love of my mother. I relish the wonder of stories, magic in the kingdoms they conjure. Patiently, nightly she read until we slept under the covers because of the love of my mother. I treasure a tender side of love. Quiet strength, gentle determination, forgiveness after a fight with a sister or a brother because of the love of my mother. I witnessed the depth of her love for Dad, eternal truth in the words, I do. Now I stare death in the face and I know I will recover because of the love of my mother. I stand before God to give thanks for her life. Daily I pray as softly I utter, I am who I am and not any other, because of the love of my mother. Every one of us need people in our life who incarnate the gospel. People who make love credible. People who stand imperfect as they are, and my mom was not perfect. She had lots of faults. But imperfect as she was, for her, she made the gospel credible. That was another one of those conversion points in my life. As I looked at the way that my mom was able to reach deep inside herself and find a compassion and a love and a mercy that I couldn't find in myself. That was a change point in my life. When the love of Christ is made tangible and real, and we receive that mercy not because we've earned it, not because we deserve it, but because it's God's gift for us, and we're honest about that, then what springs automatically from our heart is, I want to do the same. I want to show that love that she showed to me. I want to show that love that he showed to me. I want to be the face of Christ within this world. Blessed are the merciful, for mercy will be shown to them.